In this episode, I have Tessa Johns and Andy Mutnan, who are athletic trainers for the Penn State football team, joining me to discuss all things athletic training in D1 college sports. We discuss what an athletic trainer's role looks like and how it evolves season to season, what it's like to work in a D1 college football setting with extremely talented student athletes, and some of the constraints and limitations to true prehab in a competitive environment. I had the honor to collaborate with these two and the rest of the sports medicine staff this year, and I absolutely love their passion for the field and bettering their athletes. Hope you enjoy this one.
The Prehab audio experience will teach you how to take control of your health through knowledge by optimizing performance, promoting longevity, and keeping your movement system in tune. Welcome to your host, the Prehab Guys.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, so I'm super excited for this one. I know that we've been meaning to get this on the calendar for a long time since I came out in October and I got to meet you guys in person and really get, it was almost like going to Disneyland for me, checking out the Penn State athletic facilities. So I'm very excited for this.
That's what's cool for us. We get to work in Disneyland every day, right? Like we get just as jazzed about it, I promise you.
That's awesome. So if you two could just introduce yourselves for the audience, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Tessa Johns, an assistant athletic trainer here at Penn State. I'm going on my third season. Previously, I was at Louisiana State University, where I was a graduate assistant with their football team. And I'm an alumnus of Penn State, so kind of came back home to take this job.
And my name is Andy Mutnan. I'm the head football athletic trainer here at Penn State. This was the end of my second season. Kind of been a little bit of everywhere. Super excited to be back in the Big Ten and competing at the highest level. So it's been great. I get to interact with people like you, Craig, and other professionals around the country that really kind of gravitate towards the name of Penn State. So it's been awesome.
We are. I love it.
That's right, Penn State.
So could you two just shed light on what it's like to be an athletic trainer?
Yeah, I think that it's been a great experience. We have the ridiculous ability to work with some of the top high school football players in the country when they first come in and be able to really expose them to what athletic training is and how we can help them build upon what they have to not only work through weaknesses maybe that they have, but also work them through their injuries so that they can perform at very high levels. I mean, that's what they're here to do, is to perform on the field at a high level. We certainly don't want whether it's an old injury that they suffered or a tight hamstrings because of their biomechanics to hold them back from that. So really our job and our responsibility is to kind of work with others throughout our department, whether it's strength conditioning, whether it's sports science, but kind of put that puzzle together and create plans for our athletes moving forward, how we're going to address those weaknesses to make them strengths. But we also get to work with our guys, on some of the worst days of their life, right? So they go and they tear their ACL, let's say, which probably isn't a highlight of their day. But we're able to take them through that full process from prehab to surgery to post-surgical care, and to get them back on the field and have a hand in that is pretty special.
Yeah, I think to be an athletic trainer, it's kind of a roller coaster of emotions, time, energy. We invest every resource we have and every resource available into 130 plus players every season, and then the associated staff. It's kind of often that we're treating a staff member or something like that as well. But really, our time fluctuates whether we're in season or not. But like Andy was saying, it's a 24/7 job from prehabbing to injury to surgical to return to play. We kind of never stop, even though people view football season as August to January-ish. For us, it's that's our main time, but we're always in this building and we're working year round to keep these guys healthy and on the field.
I think you both bring up really good points, especially the one that you mentioned, Andy, where, sometimes we're meeting our patients and we're meeting these players at really low points in their lives. For everyone that's going into healthcare, it's not all stars and sunny and super nice. It's people come in and they're at the lowest point in their life. They're not thrilled about the situation that they're in, but it's our job to get them back to where they want to be, and then if not, even elevate that bar. So I know, along with the coaching staff and some of the other people, you guys are just spending so much time with these players. So you invest a lot of your time, your energy, and you just become really passionate about helping these guys. So it's always fun to see the success.
Yeah, and it's all encompassing, because we see them when they're having really tough days, and to be able to be that kind ear to listen to, and that soft push in the right direction, and then get to see them at some of the highest highs. As a regular person, you're watching TV and you see a wide receiver catch a touchdown. You have no idea what all went into that touchdown. That could be the first touchdown that person's had since an ACL tear. And that's a big moment. Everybody else says, oh, look, we scored a touchdown. That's great. But, to the medical staff, to the strength condition, all those people that had a hand in that process, that 6 to 9 month process, it's far, far more. We get to, just by default, we get to know these guys better, or comparable to their parents even. I mean, we spend a lot of time. We're seeing them every day for at least an hour. Again, through good times and bad. So a lot of strong bonds and relationships are formed through that process. And we're just talking about the long-term rehab guys. We're not even talking about, the other ankle sprain that lasts a couple of weeks. I mean, we still have opportunities, because we have our hands on our guys so much. We still have opportunities to continue to create those bonds and those relationships, which is it's a lot of fun, and what I believe makes my job the most rewarding.
So you bring up some interesting stuff, how it's totally unique, right? And you're spending so much time with these players, and just that one highlight, that touchdown. I mean, and not only are you guys observing it and being able to celebrate that, but it's on national television. So I want to transition to what makes being an athletic trainer so unique at the D1 collegiate level.
I think D1 has a lot of glamour with it. The athletes are, like, what I like to say is genetic freaks. I mean, to be able to come in here and play the way they do and to the level that they do all the time, that's unique already. But that also brings uniqueness to their rehab and their level of wanting to get healthy. So sometimes in a PT setting or a different setting, you might see a patient 3 times a week, depending on their insurance. But we have the luxury of seeing a guy 1, 2, or even 3 times a day. So, and the guys are willing and wanting to come in and get better. And I think that speaks volumes to how quick they can turn around with an injury. When they're in here driving themselves and pushing themselves to be better and listening to us and things like that, they're going to get on the field faster. And that just kind of a uniqueness to the D1 level athlete.
Yeah, I think that to kind of go off of that point, most of our guys are very motivated. Our guys are really healthy, minus the one issue that we're dealing with, which is big too, because, in one day, for example, they might be able to master a single leg balance, whereas maybe a person in the normal population who has the same ACL injury, it might take them a week to master that because of either other factors or their age, things like that. So our guys, again, because they're so healthy, other than what we're dealing with, they are able to master things really quickly, which is awesome to see, because we could see the change we can see, like, in a week's period of time, really can be mind-blowing. And so I think that's one of the unique things about Division I. As we said, because we're putting our hands on them so often. I mean, if we have somebody that has an acute injury, let's say they sprain their ankle on a Saturday, we're going to see them. They will receive 2 to 3 treatments minimum per day. So we're getting a lot of time with them, a lot of opportunities to continue to push the boundaries that they want to push because they want to get on the field. They recognize that the person that they want to fulfill their role to the team and provide their abilities to help the team win, achieve the team's goals. But they also have people right behind them that are chomping at the bit to get out there too. So there's kind of a unique aspect that way as well. And you're right. It's so much in the public eye. A place like here at Penn State where you're drawing over 100,000 fans to a home game. I mean, the community is behind it. There's pressures that come that way towards our kids because of that. A desire to wanting to play as quickly as possible and as healthy as possible. Definitely different than maybe other places that just don't have that kind of draw or that community attention. So definitely different that way.
I just get jitters going into the stadium, so I just can't even imagine being on the field and then having to perform.
Oh, it's nuts. And it's funny because before I ever came to Penn State, people would always ask me, well, what's the best environment that you've ever had the opportunity to play at? And I would tell everybody without hesitation, Penn State. And I've been to some other big venues. I've been in circumstances where the team I was on was getting blown out, so maybe the atmosphere wasn't as good as it could be. But the atmosphere at Penn State was always amazing. And I'd always kind of told myself, like, before it's all said and done, I want to work at a place that's like that every Saturday, like, so that my family can understand. My wife she doesn't really understand football. She's not a football person per se. To get her to walk into the stadium like that, I remember the first time she went to a spring game, she was blown away. Like the town was literally shut down. The parking was insane. Like she had never seen that before, and now she's super spoiled. So it's pretty amazing. We're very, very lucky and blessed that way.
It's quite the office.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to, you mentioned how the genetic freaks, right? It's these kids that come in and that play football at the level that they do. They're special, right? And everyone gets to watch it on television. But I know for myself, treating in the clinic, especially if it's athletes and they're coming from different schools, different programs, every program is a little bit different. And especially in high school, when you talk about resources and what these players have available to them, the education and the prior training experiences, can you just shed light a little bit about how there's got to be differences amongst the players, because you guys are recruiting from all over the nation. I know probably heavily more so the East Coast. Shout out to New Jersey from East Coast. But so it has to be different playing grounds for where most of these kids come in. Like how do you guys set that standard going into the season?
That's a really good question. What we do is we try and educate as much as we can. So when they're coming in for their physicals, we take that opportunity to talk about our services and what we provide. And that's true through all departments, because you're 100% right. The resources that we have at a large institution like Penn State are really massive. And a little bit, they kind of take you back a little bit. There's so much, so many different departments. And again, everyone's focused on the athlete and how we can help the athlete the best achieve their goals. So as they go through their physical process, when they first get here, as they go through different orientation phases, each department gets an opportunity to really talk about and highlight what they are there for, how they can help, so that we can educate the players as to what to expect, what resources you have. That's one way that we kind of do that.
Yeah, I think the guys here have a huge support system in all athletes at a D1 level, but with academics, their coaches, mental health, us, the strength staff, player development, I think our players have so much resources around them. And when they're with us specifically, I think like Andy said, we try to educate them. You would think that, most athletes by the time they get to college have maybe suffered an injury before, but we actually run into a lot where they haven't. So a lot of times we're explaining the injury and the phases and things to expect and what we're expecting of them and different things. That way they can fully understand 100% what is wrong. And also that helps them explain to, they're far away from their families. So us explaining everything in a way that they understand helps them explain to their families. So we're not getting calls, or their families aren't really worried about their son at Penn State where they don't get to see him all the time other than on Saturdays in the season or whatnot. But I think our main thing is kind of educating the athlete and making sure they 100% understand every step of the way.
Totally makes sense. And yeah, I remember when I went away to college, that was really the first time that stepped away from my parents. I mean, it's truly living on your own, especially if you're not very close to the school that you go to. So I'm curious, I know I asked what was unique about being an athletic trainer at the D1 college level, but I'm curious, what is it just like treating student athletes? And I'm curious as to how it'll be, right now before a bowl game, probably going in the finals, versus how is it when new students come into the program, it's preseason, classes haven't started yet, and then next thing you know, classes start. Because now it's not just like you're working with pro athletes where their job is to play the sport. There's not outside studying, there's not outside exams. So I'm sure there's unique challenges to that.
Yeah, so what we do is we try and set up, because everybody's schedule is so different. And one thing that's really, really unique about Penn State, and I think is a really good selling point, is we allow, and this might sound ridiculous, but we actually allow our players to get the degree that they want. So there's some places that say, here are the ones you get to pick from because they fit the football practice schedule the best. Here we have engineering majors. We have the whole gambit. So everybody's really on very different schedules, which can make it very difficult. So what we do is we try and set up our day and put people in categories. And then depending on what category you're in, you need to be in the training room by a certain block of time. That way you can kind of work it in within your schedule. So like right now, you're right, we're in the middle of finals. Today's Wednesday, so we're halfway through. We've got some guys that have already left to go home for a couple of days because we don't practice again until Thursday. We have some guys that have finals up until Friday. So we've identified, based on their condition, how many times we need to see them, what those time frames look like, so that they are still getting the treatment they need, so that when we go to practice on Thursday, they're as prepared as they can be to continue moving forward with whatever they've got going on injury-wise. And because it's year-round, it's kind of how it is for us all the time. To be honest with you, in the off-season, the quote-unquote off-season, that's when we're probably the busiest. Because during the season, we're kind of in triage mode. We're really trying to, okay, who got hurt this Saturday? What do those injuries look like? What do we got to do Sunday through Friday to give them the best chance to participate? What do those timelines look like? It's kind of like throwing it together that way. And then in the off season, as soon as this bowl game's over, my staff and I will sit down, we'll go over the entire roster person by person and talk about, okay, Johnny had some ankle injuries throughout the season. He was able to participate, but it definitely was something that nagged him. So what are we going to do to address that in the offseason? So we create maintenance programs. So we end up creating maintenance programs for a lot of people to try and take that, what might be a weakness for them, and turn it into a strength. So that's what we're doing all off season. So that's winter conditioning up until spring ball. Spring ball, we back off on maintenance because the focus then becomes football again. A little bit because of our time frames. Spring ball lasts 5 weeks. So it's not as intense as far as when's this person back and the kind of quick triage week to week. And then we start up our maintenance again in the summertime. So it kind of ebbs and flows that way, but we're always doing something with our guys. And those things either come up throughout the year because they're experiencing issues throughout the year, or things that we identified through our physical process, anything our strength conditioning coaches pick up on in the weight room during their time with them.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we do, like Andy said, is identifying things with the student athlete, or even maybe they hop up to be taped that day and they start complaining about their ankle, and we just kind of explain to them the benefits of maintenance and the intrinsic muscles, and how coming in here and just working a couple times a week is going to help them so much and keep their bodies healthy for the long haul. A lot of these guys, their dreams are to make it to the next level, the NFL. And so teaching them now that keeping up with the little nagging things that build throughout a season or throughout a lifting cycle is way better than waiting and kind of letting that injury become an injury. So we teach a lot of just intrinsic muscles and stabilizer muscles and things like that. And like Andy said, we're always kind of prepping the student athlete to be the best they can, whether that's maintenance, prehab, and then obviously post-surgical stuff.
And most of these guys if they have been hurt, they haven't had the level of service from all the different departments before. That's where the communication and the education piece really comes in, is so important. It's not always, for sure in the NFL and as well as Division I now, I mean, every team is very competitive. And really it comes down to who's the healthiest team at the end of the year. When we're lining up against a Wisconsin, none of our players on either team are really 100%, So what are we doing to try and get them to recover to the point where they're as close as they can be? And little things like that, educating them on, hey, I get that your ankle hurts here a little bit. Let's do a few things so that it stops hurting versus covering it up with some heavy tape. And then before you know it, you can't walk. Now, instead of addressing it now you're missing games because you can't walk, and then that obviously becomes problematic. So that education piece is so important, showing, and it helps too for us, the word of mouth within the locker room, so that guys could see that when someone got hurt, or I knew that Tim was complaining about his ankle, well, then he came in and got better. Well, you know what? My ankle kind of hurts too. Maybe I should go that same route. Or, hey, you should, the players talking amongst themselves, hey, address that with the sports medicine staff so you can get it better, so it doesn't become an issue. That's been big for us the last couple of years, kind of building that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned earlier that some players come in, they come to the program and they've never been injured before. So it can be a harder sell, especially for a teenager. I mean, I became a physical therapist for a reason, because I kept playing soccer. I wasn't listening to what they were telling me to do, and then I never got back to soccer. But ultimately, they weren't really telling me the best things to do. But that led to the fact that, okay, I want to eventually help people where they're getting the right care, they're getting the right education, and they can get back to what they want to do. So having some of those older players in the locker room that can speak up and really educate the younger guys, like, hey, this is what you need to do. And I just think where social media is nowadays and ESPN, it's players and everyone just really values, like, hey, you need to take care of yourself all the time. The value of sports medicine and the value of the player personnel, the sports medicine staff, because like you said, it's player availability. I'm an Eagles fan right now, and the Eagles, they're so thin. It makes it really tough to compete if you're having a hard time with your player availability.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the casual fan doesn't understand that either. Sometimes you have a run of bad luck and you got some injuries that has nothing to do with the team dynamic, has nothing to do with the coach, has to do with two guys broke their leg in some freak deal. That happens, and all of a sudden two key people can be the difference, because it is such a razor thin margin between teams. Everyone's talented. Everyone has great players. They really do. And so what is that advantage? What's that edge? We try and make that edge be our recovery piece and our availability.
Yeah, I heard the quote that, all of these small things that we're mentioning, it's maintenance programs and really taking care of yourself during the off season. Really, the off season, in my opinion, is just off season from television. Like, the games aren't there, but sports medicine staff and your players, you're working 12 months out of the year. But maintenance programs and good warm-ups and prehab programs, all of these things, they may not necessarily help us win games, but they can definitely help us maybe avoid losing games. It's all these small things that add up.
Absolutely. You go and look at through the years, people that have had some losing seasons, I'm telling you, it has to do with injuries. And they kind of come in waves, And again, you get a key person. I've been on teams where we maybe weren't as talented, and if something were to happen to one of these two players, we would have never won. I mean, there are some teams that are like that are centered so much around 1 to 2 players that, God forbid, something happened, that you don't have a chance. So it's and that's the times that I've put some of the most pressure on myself, because we maybe didn't have very much depth. And so I was constantly concerned and worried and anxious about trying to make sure those couple people were ready to go, because I knew their backups, we were in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you touched about the recovery part. I think for our guys, it's kind of a joke on Sunday when they come in and they're slow to move and stuff like that. And I said, you just played in a 4-hour football game. You feel like you played like that? And they're like, yeah, and some games are worse than others. And the amount of that football takes a toll on their body, people also don't necessarily realize that. I mean, on Sundays, they come through here like they've been hit by a truck or something. They're pretty beat up, and not injury-wise, just their body is worn out. So we have such a high level that we place on recovery. I mean, we have a recovery room here for the guys. And then on Sundays, we focus so much on just turning them back around, getting functional, getting their blood flow moving again, and just kind of taking away all those bumps and bruises.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I want to hear from you two, because you've been in the field long enough, and you mentioned the word recovery, and it's such a hot topic. Recovery, load management. There's no such thing as load management in football. It's like you said, and these guys feel like they get hit by a truck. Well, if you were to add up the tackles and the forces, yeah, they probably got bumped by a few smart cars out there.
Yeah.
So how has the field adapted since you guys came into the field versus where it is now? And, we can talk about recovery. We can talk about what goes into training the players in the off season versus regular season. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, well, I think that it's changed in so many different avenues. There was a point in time in which, the medical staff was like the manager that set out some water and had the balls, and they kind of were a one-stop shop for all of those things. And obviously football and sports continue to evolve. Then it was, the athletic trainer showed up, and then we also did some nutritional counseling, and we also did some load management stuff, and worked with coaches on practice plans. And well, now that's then spun off even more. Now we have full nutrition departments where we have 2 people that work with our athletes closely just about nutrition. So that when they see that someone has, we'll use our example of an ACL. When someone tears their ACL, not only are they doing stuff with us, but they're also meeting with nutrition. And nutrition is going over, okay, now that your caloric demands have changed, now that what your body is going through has changed, how are we addressing those issues? What are we doing from a nutritional side to ensure that all of the nutrients you need to help rebuild and recover from that surgery, we're getting into your body? What are we doing? Because before you got hurt, you were a 300-pound offensive lineman that was shoving as much food in their face as they could because their expenditure was so high. Well, now that's reversed. So if you continue down that same caloric intake, all of a sudden now you're going to get really overweight and slow. Well, that's not what we need. So how are we adjusting and making changes there? So that department, I think, has changed a lot. Again, these are some examples that, like the bigger schools that we're lucky enough to have access to, not everybody does. Sports science. I mean, we now have a sports science department that goes through and does baseline testing on like NordBoard stuff to look at hamstring concentric and eccentric strength. We're doing force plate stuff with our guys to look at jump recovery. We're doing GPS data points. There's so many different GPS data points now that we're tracking so much during not only practice but games. We're taking that information to our coaches and saying, okay, coach, we just got done playing Team X, and it was a double overtime game. It was a physical game. We can tell that by our eyes watching the game, but it also plays out in the numbers. And so what are we going to do to adjust practice on Sunday address it on Monday, maybe even make adjustments Tuesday and Wednesday to ensure that we're back and recovered to what our 100% is. And that's going to ebb and flow every week. And based on all of those numbers and GPS data points as they go and crunch those, what does the season look like? We're playing 12 games, 13 if we're in a championship, 14 if we're going to a bowl game, and so on. What are we doing to ensure that at the end of our last game of the year, we're as recovered as we could be, just like we were the first game of the year? And so I think that's one of the big adaptations. All the different wearables, all the different playing surfaces, all that kind of stuff, I think has really changed a lot.
Yeah, I think specifically in athletic training, I think I get worried sometimes when people are like, well, I've been doing this for the last 10 years. Well, to me, think of how you treat an ACL 10 years ago. It's completely different than how you treat an ACL right now. The same with concussions. I mean, that ebbs and flows like crazy. Sometimes back a couple years ago, they were saying, hold off on cognitive stuff. Don't let them return to the classroom. Now the research is get them back in the classroom, get to their level that they can, but get them returning to function. Before concussions was go sit in a dark room and rest. And now it's, here's a vestibular rehab program where we're getting them to start doing some eye tracking. We're getting them to start using different things within a room to make themselves have spatial awareness again and get kind of things like that moving for them. That's completely changed even in my short time of being a certified athletic trainer, as well as, the level of function. I think previously a lot of people did more rest, more ice, more, things like that, elevation. And now it's kind of, you want the body to move. The body wants to move. So you need to start slight motion and build off of the athlete's tolerance or the patient's tolerance. And we've all seen way better results kind of being more functional than not.
Yeah, recovery has gone from such a passive thing to now it's active. It's what am I doing for my recovery versus people would be like, okay, we're just going to lay on the couch and watch Sunday football today. That's our recovery.
Well, the science, just the science behind everything has gotten so much better. And even as something as mundane as like riding a bike. I mean, people are researching that to see, what's actually going on with your body and understanding what's going on in the cells and your cardiovascular and your blood flow. And okay, knowing that, how can we use that to our advantage? So all of those things have just been more and more people are looking into. We have more sophisticated ways of measuring those outputs, of evaluating those things, putting data to it so we can say, okay, now that we understand it better, we know that riding a bike increases our blood flow, but what else can we learn from that and how can we apply it? I think continues to evolve. I mean, our area, medicine just in general, continues to evolve. Every 5 years, everything's different. And so that can be really overwhelming too, trying to stay on top of that wave.
Big time.
But that's kind of where we're at, and that's how it continues to evolve and adapt, is really getting involved in that research component and seeing what we're finding out and critically thinking about, okay, why are we doing this? What benefit are we looking for? If I want to get X, what can I do to get X and maximize everything I can?
Where would you two like to see the field go? You mentioned all these good changes and how different things have been since you've entered, and a lot of the stuff is excellent, right? It's now, okay, there is some load management that we can sort out with our players. Now I actually know the true distance that this player covered in this week. And this is sort of where he's on track with this rehab program, or the distance that he was covering last year before he got hurt. But where do you feel like the field could still go?
Well, for me, I think the field could always continue to grow as far as getting the athletes to just buy in on warm-ups, buy in on being body aware, whether it's, okay, I'm starting to have some shoulder pain from all this hitting. Maybe I need to start working on my rotator cuff again for stabilization. But as far as the degree or the profession itself, I'd love for it to grow in in the general population's understanding of what we do. I think a lot of times I tell someone I'm an athletic trainer and they say, well, how do you make those boys lift all those weights? And I kind of laugh because it's not what I do at all.
Yeah.
So I think getting more recognition of what this profession is something big for me, but specifically with the guys, again, I think it's just getting them to continue to be more body aware and let them grow on their own in that way of realizing what's wrong and how they can take care of it.
I think I'm really excited to see with all this information how we're collectively able to make these activities more just safer for our athletes. I think that's really important. There's inherent risk in every sport, every activity. Me driving to work, that's an inherent risk. And you can never take away all of the inherent risk. But if there's things we can do, if there's things we can do and that we can better understand so that we can reduce that risk as much as possible, I think fans would love that. I think the athletes would love everyone would benefit from that. And so I think that's really the direction that we continue to move is making things safer. And if we know, there's so much has been done about concussion, about, if we could ever determine how much force and in what direction will cause a concussion, to find that threshold and be able to utilize that, then we could better treat those people and wouldn't have to rely so much on symptoms that they're having that rely on them to report or any of that stuff. Then we could be a little bit more clear about it. I think that's true for anything. Overuse. I mean, back in the day, you just always ran millions of miles because that's just what we do. Well, now we know that actually might predispose you to certain things. So again, how can we limit that and bring that inherent risk down? I think I enjoy seeing us move that direction collectively, and I think that's only going to get better. And I think that as far as like the profession goes specifically, I think to continue to educate people on what we can do, how valuable we can be in so many different settings. There's fire departments that are hiring athletic trainers to help firefighters, police officers. People are working in hospitals doing triage at ERs. At one time I happened to be in the ER myself, and there was a poor person whose shoulder was dislocated. And it took all I could not to go over there and help reduce it for them to take them out of pain, or at least attempt to, while they just sat in the waiting room for the next available doctor. So I think there's lots of opportunities that way too for sports or athletic training specifically.
And I think like right now we currently have an athlete doing recovery with BFR, and I think seeing how far BFR can go or blood flow restriction is also something I look forward to. I think that we are just touching on the benefits of BFR, and I think that's going to continue to grow and learn. And then, like Andy was saying with the concussions, we actually had 32 players in a voluntary study over the last season, and we kind of tracked their hits with accelerometer inside their helmets. They had an accelerometer that they wore, and we also had some MRI and blood markers, and just doing research like that with our players here is so awesome. It's going to help us in so many ways in the future.
Yeah, I mean, from the sports medicine staff to the coaches to the players to the fans, safety needs to be a priority. Everyone loves this game. Everyone is passionate about sports. We just want to keep sports around, and we want to keep players around for longevity. So this has been awesome. I want to finish with one thing. So I'm curious, you guys are going to be having new players rolling in next year. And, we just spent the last 40 minutes or so, give or take, really hitting home on the value of taking care of your body and maintenance. So when these players roll in, I'm curious if they were to ask you like, hey, Andy, hey, Tessa, what prehab stuff can I do for my body? Like, what's prehab? What is your guys' elevator pitch to the players on what prehab is for football?
I think I think our elevator pitch is that what we want to do is we want to take prehab to us is addressing small issues before they become big issues. So as an athlete comes through, goes through our physical process, identifies, I pull my hamstring every 2 weeks like clockwork. We sit down, we educate and say, okay, well, we can actually change that for you. We can take that weakness and turn it into a strength, because though you might have been the fastest wide receiver or the best wide receiver in your conference, we've got now 10 of those guys of the same guy. They are just as talented. So what are you going to do to separate yourself from that group? One thing you could do is focus on this hamstring in our example, make that a strength so that doesn't become a deterrent for you in participating at the highest level you can. That's going to be my pitch.
Yeah. Prehab, I mean, that's kind of like to get it in an athlete's mindset, it's kind of like preseason for your body. I mean, what are you going to do to prepare for football? You're going to make sure you're in shape. You're going to make sure your lifting is right so you can make it through that haul. Well, it's kind of the same thing. Well, what about your body? What does your body need to make it? What does your body need to have the best outcome after a surgery? You're just going to go in kind of with your quad atrophied after it's had some swelling, or you're going to prehab and work really hard to build up all those things. So that way, when your body has to go through a natural process of injury, you're not as far behind as you maybe would have been. And then going back, the preseason is how can we make sure that your shoulder stays stable? How can we make sure that your ankle, football often becomes a one-sided sport, and you're on one ankle and you're stiff arming someone away from you, and the forces that go through that one side of your body are unreal. So how can we make sure that we keep you leveled out and keep those injuries down?
I love the competition thing. Oh man, I just wish that I could hit that home with the average person. It's like, hey, I got 9 other people competing with you for this delivery thing. You better get it going.
Well, and that's one of the unique things about being at a big school. We have a bunch of athletes, and if you are not able to practice, the guy behind you is more than happy to take your reps. And that person might be as good as you, maybe slightly better, maybe slightly worse, but they're able to participate and take those reps and make themselves better and utilize those reps. So, we definitely have some guys that are very motivated by that. They would not be, if they weren't competitive people, they wouldn't be at Penn State. I mean,
exactly.
That's just the fact of the matter. Now, sometimes that can get in the way. Sometimes it can get in the way because we have certain things we don't want them to do, but they say, well, I got to get back out there as fast as I can. I'm going to do more. Well, actually, you're hurting yourself and you're hindering your ability to get out there sooner. Wow. So we definitely have some guys that we have to rein in. We have some guys that we have to push sometimes. But thankfully, we don't have as many of those guys as we do. We have to rein back, and we just really harp on these guys understand film. Like, okay, I watch a lot of film. That's how I prepare. So one of the things I talk about throughout the week is hydration preparation. I've been saying it for years, and people have always made fun of me. But the thing is just like you watch a lot of film, you've got to hydrate yourself in this example. You've got to prepare to make sure that you're ready for the game. Rehab is no different than film, than spending extra time in the weight room doing some biceps, than doing some extra time recovery. Like, do some stuff for your body to make sure that you're where you need to be, that you're confident in your body's abilities to do what you need to do to be successful on Saturdays.
I'm fired up. I'm going to go do some prehab now. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on, taking the time out of your busy schedules. I really enjoyed this one, and I know a lot of other people are going to enjoy it as well.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It's been truly a thrilling experience getting to know you better and to being able to collaborate. This is your tweet. I'm going to sound old for a minute, but like your tweets and all those things. I mean, I've been following for a long time. I know a lot of my colleagues do, and to be able to participate in things like this is awesome. And I want to thank you guys for what you do. I think it's an important aspect of sports medicine that doesn't get enough attention, and you've got a great audience out there that's soaking it up and is very like-minded. So we love participating wherever we can.
Oh yeah, our guys are starting to get used to all the Prehab guys' faces because I put your videos up on our TVs a lot to show them different stretches and different things.
That's amazing. All right, guys, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this podcast. I learned a lot about what goes into college football behind the scenes. I hope you did too. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. It would mean the world to us. Also, please drop a comment if you'd like to hear about other topics or other people you would like us to interview. Take care.